In the heart of a bustling city park, laughter and chatter dance on the breeze as children play and couples stroll hand in hand. Amidst this vibrant scene, 12-year-old Alex, with his untamed mop of hair, notices an elderly man, Mr. Thompson, sitting alone on a weathered bench, silent tears tracing lines down his cheeks. Drawn by a mix of curiosity and compassion, Alex decides to approach, setting in motion a series of events that will forever change both their lives. The sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the city as it prepared to bid farewell to another day. In the midst of the urban hustle and bustle, a small green oasis thrived, a park where the noise of traffic was drowned out by the laughter of children and the rustling of leaves. Here, dreams seemed to take flight as easily as the pigeons fluttering about, and amidst this vibrant tapestry was a boy named Alex. At 12 years old, Alex was a bundle of energy and curiosity. His hair, a wild mop of brown curls, seemed to have a mind of its own, much like the boy himself. His eyes, a striking shade of hazel, were always wide with wonder, taking in the world with an insatiable appetite. He lived with his mother, Sarah, in a small, cozy apartment just a few blocks from the park. Though their home was modest and their belongings few, it was filled with warmth and love. Sarah, a hardworking nurse, did her best to provide for Alex, often going without so that he could have what he needed. "Mom, look what I found," Alex exclaimed one evening, bursting through the door with a book he discovered in the park's little free library. His excitement was contagious, and Sarah couldn't help but smile, despite her exhaustion after a long shift at the hospital. "Another adventure book?" she teased, ruffling his hair affectionately. "You're going to run out of space for all these stories." "I'll never run out of space for stories," Alex replied with conviction, hugging the book to his chest. "I can always make room in my head." His mother chuckled softly, pulling him into a hug. "As long as you keep making room in your heart too, that's what matters." Despite their financial struggles, Alex was rich in imagination and love. He often spent his afternoons in the park, escaping into the pages of a book or exploring every nook and cranny as if on a great adventure. But beneath his cheerful demeanor, there was a longing, a quiet ache for the father he never knew. Sarah had been both mother and father to Alex, and though she filled his life with love, he yearned for the presence of a father figure, someone to guide him and share in his triumphs and failures. Meanwhile, in a quiet corner of the same park, another soul sought solace. Mr. Thompson, a retired gentleman in his late 70s, had found refuge on a weathered bench under a great oak tree. His once robust frame had become frail, his hair a crown of silver atop a face etched with the lines of a life well lived, yet marked by sorrow. Widowed and estranged from his only son, Mr. Thompson carried a heavy heart, burdened by loneliness and regret. Since his wife's passing, the park had become his sanctuary, a place where he could be alone with his thoughts and memories. Each day, he would sit on the old bench, watching the world go by, lost in reminiscences of happier times. The laughter of children and the sight of families together served as bittersweet reminders of the family he once had, now lost to time and mistakes he wished he could undo. On most days, Mr. Thompson would sit quietly, observing the life around him with a sense of detachment, but there was something about this particular day that felt different. Perhaps it was the crispness of the autumn air or the way the leaves danced in the wind, but his heart felt heavier than usual, and the familiar ache of loneliness settled deeper within him. As he sat there, lost in thought, a single tear escaped, tracing a path down his weathered cheek. It was then that Alex, who had been wandering through the park as was his routine, caught sight of the elderly man. There was something about the sight of Mr. Thompson's solitary figure, the sadness etched on his face, that tugged at Alex's heart. Curiosity mingled with compassion as Alex approached, clutching the book he had been reading. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to bridge the gap between them, but his innate kindness urged him forward. He took a deep breath, stepping into the older man's line of sight. "Hi," Alex said, his voice gentle but filled with the kind of openness that only a child could muster. "Is everything okay?" Mr. Thompson blinked, surprised by the intrusion but not unwelcoming. He looked at the boy, noting the earnest concern in his eyes. It had been a long time since anyone had asked him how he was doing, let alone a stranger. I'm I'm fine, Mr. Thompson replied, his voice gruff from disuse. He attempted a smile, but it faltered. Alex, unfazed by the less than enthusiastic response, plopped down onto the bench beside him. I'm Alex, he introduced himself, extending a hand as if sealing a pact of friendship. The old man hesitated before shaking the boy's hand, the gesture sparking a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. Thompson, he said, his voice softening. Mr. Thompson. Nice to meet you, Mr. Thompson, Alex said brightly. I come here a lot. It's a good place to read and think. The conversation that followed was simple, filled with the kind of innocence and curiosity that only a child could bring. Alex asked questions about the park, about Mr. Thompson's favorite spots, and shared snippets of his own life, like how he loved reading adventure stories and how his mother made the best pancakes on Sundays. Mr. Thompson found himself talking more than he had in years, the boy's presence a balm to his weary soul. As Alex spoke, he listened intently, nodding and offering a chuckle at the boy's enthusiasm. It was as if the weight of his loneliness had been momentarily lifted, replaced by a warmth that spread through him. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Alex stood up, brushing off his jeans. I should get home before my mom starts to worry, he said, a hint of reluctance in his voice. But I'll see you tomorrow? Mr. Thompson nodded, a genuine smile breaking through. I'd like that, Alex. I'd like that very much. With a final wave, Alex bounded off, his heart lighter, knowing he had made a difference, even if just for a little while. And as Mr. Thompson watched him disappear into the evening twilight, a spark of hope flickered within him, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the light of kindness could find its way in. On a brisk autumn afternoon, the park was alive with the kaleidoscope of falling leaves, swirling in the gentle breeze like confetti. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched across the playground where children shrieked with joy, their laughter a melody in the cool air. Alex, with his backpack slung over one shoulder, ambled towards his favorite spot near the old oak tree. He loved the park. It was his escape, a world where imagination and reality blended seamlessly. As he approached the oak, something unusual caught his eye, a solitary figure hunched over on a nearby bench. The figure was an elderly man, his shoulders shaking slightly, head bowed as if the weight of the world had settled upon him. Alex slowed his pace, curiosity piqued. It wasn't often he saw adults cry, especially in public, and something about the scene tugged at his heart. Despite the chilly air, Alex felt a warmth rising within him, a soft nudge propelling him forward. He hesitated for a brief moment, glancing back towards the bustling park, then turned his gaze back to the man. There was a gentleness in his approach, each step careful and purposeful. As he neared the bench, he could hear the soft, muffled sobs, each one a testament to a sorrow too deep for words. Hi, Alex said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, as he stood before the man. The elderly gentleman lifted his head slightly, revealing a face etched with lines of time and pain, his eyes red-rimmed and glassy. Alex offered a tentative smile, hoping it might somehow bridge the chasm of loneliness he sensed. Hello, the man replied, his voice gruff yet tinged with surprise. He quickly wiped at his eyes with a handkerchief, attempting to mask his vulnerability. Mind if I sit? Alex asked, gesturing to the empty space beside him. The man nodded, a flicker of gratitude passing across his features. Alex plopped down, the bench creaking under his weight, and for a moment they sat in silence, the only sound the rustling leaves and distant chatter. I'm Alex, the boy eventually offered, turning his gaze towards the man. I come here a lot with my mom. It's a nice place to think. A faint smile tugged at the corners of the man's mouth. I'm Mr. Thompson, he replied after a pause, his voice softening. I used to come here with my wife. We'd sit for hours, just talking or watching the world go by. Alex nodded, sensing the unspoken words beneath Mr. Thompson's confession. I'm sorry, he said, his voice earnest. I bet she was really nice. She was, Mr. Thompson murmured, his gaze distant. She always knew how to make everything better. Silence enveloped them once more, not awkward but comforting, each lost in their own thoughts. Then, as if compelled by some unseen force, Alex spoke again. You know, I don't have a dad, he confessed, staring at his scuffed sneakers. But it's okay. My mom and I, we make it work. Mr. Thompson looked at Alex, the boy's openness and warmth cutting through his sorrow like a beacon. It was a simple statement, yet it resonated deeply within him, a reminder of the connections that still existed, even in the face of loss. And so, on that chilly autumn afternoon, amidst the laughter of children and the rustling of leaves, an unlikely friendship began. Alex's act of kindness, born out of empathy and curiosity, shattered the solitude Mr. Thompson had wrapped around himself, setting the stage for a journey that neither could have anticipated. As the leaves turned gold and the crispness of autumn settled into Alex's cheeks, his trips to the park became more than just an escape from the confines of his small apartment. They transformed into an anticipated ritual, a time to sit beside Mr. Thompson, whose presence had become a comforting constant in Alex's young life. Each meeting brought with it new stories, shared laughter, and an unspoken understanding that bridged the gap between their generations. Alex would often arrive with a book tucked under his arm, ready to share the latest adventure he had read. Mr. Thompson, with his gentle eyes and a voice seasoned by years of experience, would lean forward, genuinely interested in the tales Alex spun. "And then the knight," Alex said one afternoon, his voice animated, "he fought the dragon with just a rusty sword. Can you believe it?" "Ah, bravery," Mr. Thompson replied, his eyes twinkling. "Sometimes that's all one needs, isn't it? A bit of courage, even when the odds are against you." Their conversations were a dance between the past and the future. Alex, with his unending curiosity, would pepper Mr. Thompson with questions about his life, eager to learn from someone who had seen so much of the world before him. Mr. Thompson, who had once thought his stories were better left untold, found a kind of solace in sharing them. One afternoon, as the sun dipped lower in the sky and cast long shadows across the park, Alex asked, "Do you miss your family, Mr. Thompson?" The question lingered in the chilly air. Mr. Thompson paused, a pained expression flickering across his face. "Every day," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes the choices we make, they separate us from the ones we love." Alex nodded, sensing the weight of Mr. Thompson's regret. "Maybe you could tell them you're sorry," he suggested, his tone innocent yet profound in its simplicity. "Perhaps," Mr. Thompson mused, a flicker of hope igniting in his heart. As their friendship blossomed, Alex's mother, Claire, noticed the change in her son. He would come home from the park, his cheeks flushed with excitement, his stories filled with mentions of Mr. Thompson this and Mr. Thompson that. At first, Claire was relieved that her son had found a friend. But as weeks turned into months, her relief shifted to worry. Who was this man who had become so important to her child? One evening, as Alex recounted another tale from the park, Claire decided it was time to voice her concerns. "Alex, honey," she began, carefully choosing her words, "you've been spending a lot of time with Mr. Thompson. Are you sure it's safe?" "Of course, Mom," Alex replied, a hint of exasperation in his voice. "Mr. Thompson is amazing. He listens to me, and he tells the best stories. He's like the grandpa I never had." Claire smiled softly, but the worry lines on her forehead deepened. "I just want to make sure you're safe, sweetheart. Maybe I could meet him?" Alex's eyes lit up at the suggestion. "That would be great. You'd love him, I promise." Meanwhile, Mr. Thompson was grappling with his own set of challenges. Encouraged by Alex's unwavering belief in the power of forgiveness, he had attempted to reach out to his estranged son. The effort, however, had not gone as he had hoped. A terse conversation and a slammed phone had left Mr. Thompson reeling, the sting of rejection fresh and painful. One snowy afternoon, as Alex and Mr. Thompson sat watching the ducks waddle across the frozen pond, the old man confided in his young friend. "I tried to talk to my son," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow, "but it seems he's not ready to forgive me yet." Alex listened intently, his heart aching for Mr. Thompson. "Maybe he's scared," Alex suggested, his voice gentle. "Sometimes it's hard to let people back in when they've hurt you." Mr. Thompson nodded, appreciating the wisdom in Alex's words. "You're right, Alex. I hope one day he'll understand how much I miss him." Their bond continued to grow, each meeting a balm for Mr. Thompson's loneliness and a source of joy for Alex. The park, once a place of solitude for the old man, was now filled with laughter and the warmth of a shared connection. As winter deepened, the park became a wonderland of glistening snow and ice. Alex and Mr. Thompson would bundle up in scarves and gloves, their breath visible in the frosty air as they talked and played games in the snow. Alex taught Mr. Thompson how to build a snowman, their laughter echoing amidst the bare trees. Claire, true to her word, visited the park one day to meet the man who had become such an integral part of her son's life. As she approached the bench, she saw them both engaged in a spirited snowball fight, their laughter infectious. Her apprehension melted away, replaced by a sense of gratitude for the joy Mr. Thompson had brought into Alex's life. "Hello," Claire said, extending her hand to Mr. Thompson once the snowball fight had subsided. "I'm Claire, Alex's mother." Mr. Thompson smiled warmly, shaking her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Claire. Alex speaks so highly of you." As they talked, Claire found herself charmed by Mr. Thompson's kindness and sincerity. She saw in him a man who had weathered life's storms, yet remained gentle and open-hearted. Her earlier fears dissipated, and she understood why Alex had been drawn to him. Despite the harmony that had developed, the shadow of Mr. Thompson's unresolved relationship with his son lingered. It was a topic he and Alex revisited often, each conversation offering Mr. Thompson a glimmer of hope that perhaps one day reconciliation might be possible. The bond between Alex and Mr. Thompson was a testament to the power of human connection. Their friendship, born from a simple act of kindness, continued to flourish, weaving together the lives of those around them. Claire, now fully accepting of Mr. Thompson's role in her son's life, watched as the two embarked on adventures, their laughter a melody that filled the air. In the quiet moments, Mr. Thompson found himself contemplating the idea of family. Alex had, in his innocent wisdom, redefined the concept for him. Family wasn't just about bloodlines or shared history. It was about choosing to love and care for one another, regardless of the circumstances. As spring hinted at its arrival, bringing with it the promise of renewal, Mr. Thompson began to entertain a newfound possibility, one that could transform his life and Alex's forever. The winter evening descended gently on the city, draping the park in a hushed white blanket of snow. Street lamps flickered on, casting warm golden halos through the swirling flakes. The park, a sanctuary for both Alex and Mr. Thompson, seemed almost magical under the snowfall, its usual hustle silenced by the season's embrace. Alex trudged through the snow, his breath forming little clouds in the frosty air. His heart was a mix of excitement and anticipation. As he approached their usual bench, he saw Mr. Thompson already there, bundled in his thick woolen coat, a scarf wrapped snugly around his neck. The old man's eyes, usually shadowed with sadness, now held a reflective glimmer as he watched Alex approach. "Evening, Mr. Thompson," Alex called out, his voice as bright as the snow around them. "Good evening, Alex," Mr. Thompson replied, patting the space beside him. "Cold doesn't seem to bother you, does it?" "Not when I've got company like yours," Alex grinned, plopping down beside him. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, watching the snowflakes dance in the light. The park, though cold, felt oddly warm, wrapped in the quiet comfort of their friendship. But tonight, there was a different air about Mr. Thompson, a weight he seemed ready to share. "Alex," Mr. Thompson began, his voice softer than usual, "do you remember what we talked about last time? About family?" Alex nodded, his curiosity piqued. "You said you were upset about your son." A sigh escaped Mr. Thompson, visible in the cold air. "Yes, about my son. After my wife passed, I didn't handle things well. I pushed him away, thinking I was protecting him from my grief, but in truth, I was just scared of losing more." Alex listened intently, his young mind absorbing the complexity of adult emotions. "Did you ever try talking to him again?" he asked, his voice gentle. "I did," Mr. Thompson admitted, the sorrow evident in his eyes. "But it didn't go as I hoped. Some things, once broken, are hard to fix." Alex, with the pure clarity only a child could offer, pondered for a moment before speaking. "My mom always tells me that family isn't just about who you're related to. It's about who's there for you, who cares about you." Mr. Thompson looked at Alex, the boy's words piercing through the layers of regret and loneliness that had cloaked him for years. "You're wise beyond your years, Alex. You've shown me that family can be chosen, that it's not just about blood." Alex shrugged modestly, a smile playing at the corners of his lips. "Well, I think you're kind of like family to me, Mr. Thompson." The old man's heart warmed at this innocent declaration. He had found solace, companionship, and a sense of purpose in these meetings with Alex. There was a time he thought such connections were lost to him forever. Alex, Mr. Thompson said, turning to face him fully, what would you think about becoming a more permanent part of my life? About us being a family, officially? Alex's eyes widened, the snow forgotten as the weight of Mr. Thompson's words sank in. You mean, like adoption? Yes, Mr. Thompson nodded, his voice trembling with both hope and fear. If it's something you and your mother would consider, I know it's a big decision. A silence stretched between them, filled only with the soft whisper of falling snow. Alex's mind raced, thoughts of having a father, someone to guide him, to share his life with. It was a dream he had dared not voice, yet here it was, offered by the man who had become so dear to him. Mr. Thompson, I'd like that, Alex finally said, his voice steady and sincere. But we'll need to talk to my mom. Mr. Thompson smiled, a glimmer of tears in his eyes, not of sadness, but of gratitude and joy. Of course, Alex, we'll talk to her, together. As they sat there, the snow continued to fall, covering the earth in a pure, white promise of new beginnings. The park bench, once a place of solitude, now symbolized the start of a new chapter, one filled with love, acceptance, and the family they were choosing to build. The evening was draped in a gentle snowfall, the world outside Mr. Thompson's modest house blanketed in a serene white. The old man had spent the day preparing, each dish a labor of love and nervous anticipation. He had set the dining table meticulously, polishing the silverware until it gleamed, and arranging the flowers in the center with the same care he'd once reserved for his wife's favorite garden. Inside, the warmth of the fireplace cast a golden glow over the room, flickering shadows dancing against the walls. The air was filled with the comforting aroma of roast chicken and baked apples, mingling with the faint scent of pine from the Christmas tree that stood proudly in the corner, its lights twinkling like stars. Mr. Thompson adjusted his tie in the hallway mirror, his hands trembling slightly. Tonight was pivotal, an evening that could change his life and Alex's forever. He glanced at the old clock on the mantelpiece, its steady tick-tock matching the rhythm of his heart. Any moment now, they would arrive. A soft knock on the door pulled him from his thoughts, and he hurried to answer it, pausing briefly to smooth his thinning hair. As he opened the door, he was greeted by the sight of Alex and his mother, bundled against the cold, their cheeks flushed pink. "Hello, Mr. Thompson?" Alex chirped, his eyes bright with excitement. The boy's smile was infectious, instantly easing the old man's nerves. "Alex, Mrs. Carter, please come in," Mr. Thompson said warmly, stepping aside to welcome them. The boy bounced into the house, his energy filling the room, while his mother, a petite woman with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor, followed more cautiously. She took in the cozy living room, her gaze lingering on the photographs of Mr. Thompson and his late wife that adorned the walls, silent witnesses to a life once full of laughter and love. "Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Thompson. Everything smells wonderful," Mrs. Carter said, a hint of apprehension in her voice. "It's my pleasure. I'm just glad you could both make it," Mr. Thompson replied, leading them to the dining room. As they settled around the table, Mr. Thompson couldn't help but notice the way Alex's eyes widened at the sight of the feast before them. He chuckled softly, the sound a balm to his own anxieties. "Wow, Mr. Thompson, this looks amazing!" Alex exclaimed, his enthusiasm genuine and unrestrained. "I'm glad you think so, Alex. I hope it tastes as good as it looks," Mr. Thompson replied, serving portions with a steady hand. Throughout the meal, the conversation flowed easily, albeit with an underlying current of tension. Alex regaled Mr. Thompson with tales of his school adventures, his voice animated as he recounted a recent victory in a soccer match. Mr. Thompson listened intently, his heart swelling with pride and affection for the boy who had become such a central part of his life. Mrs. Carter watched the interaction closely, her heart caught in a whirlwind of emotions. Seeing her son so happy, so at ease with Mr. Thompson, stirred something deep within her, an understanding of the bond they shared and the profound impact it had on Alex's life. As the evening drew on, Mr. Thompson knew it was time. He cleared his throat, the sound drawing the attention of his guests. "There's something I'd like to discuss with both of you," he began, his voice steady but laced with emotion. "It's been a joy getting to know you, Alex, and I've come to think of you as more than just a friend." Alex's eyes widened in surprise, a flicker of hope lighting up his features. Mrs. Carter remained silent, her gaze unwavering as she braced herself for the words to come. "I've been thinking a lot about family," Mr. Thompson continued, his eyes meeting Alex's, then shifting to his mother's, "and what it means to choose to love someone as family. I've spoken to my lawyer, and, well, I'd like to formally adopt Alex." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Alex's heart skipped a beat, joy and disbelief mingling within him. He turned to his mother, his eyes silently pleading for her approval. Mrs. Carter's heart clenched. She had known this moment might come, had sensed the deepening connection between her son and Mr. Thompson. Still, hearing the words aloud brought a torrent of emotions. She took a deep breath, her mind racing with concerns and fears, but also with the undeniable truth of what she'd witnessed over the months. "Mr. Thompson," she began, her voice steady yet soft, "I can see how much you care for Alex, and I've seen how happy he is spending time with you. But I'm his mother. I've raised him on my own for so long, and the thought of—" Her voice faltered, emotion choking her words. Mr. Thompson nodded, his expression understanding. "I know, Mrs. Carter, and I'm not trying to take him away from you. You'll always be his mother. I want to be there for him too, to be someone he can rely on, a father figure. We'd be a family, all of us." Alex watched the exchange, his heart aching for his mother's pain but also filled with hope. He reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "Mom, please," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "I love you, and I love Mr. Thompson too. Can't we be a family together?" Tears welled in Mrs. Carter's eyes, the sincerity in her son's voice cutting through her fears. She looked at Mr. Thompson, seeing not just an old man but someone who had opened his heart to her son, offering him love and guidance without reservation. After a long, silent moment, she nodded, her decision made. "All right," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "If this is what makes you happy, Alex, then I'm willing to try. But we'll do this together, as a family." Relief and joy washed over Alex, and he threw his arms around his mother, hugging her tightly. Mr. Thompson watched them, his heart full, gratitude and love shining in his eyes. "Thank you, Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice fervent. "I promise I'll do my best for Alex, for both of you." The rest of the evening passed in a warm haze of laughter and newfound unity. The initial tension had dissolved, replaced by a sense of belonging and hope for the future. As they sat together, sipping hot cocoa by the fireplace, Alex nestled between his mother and Mr. Thompson. The world outside continued to shimmer with fresh snow, a promise of new beginnings. In that moment, under the soft glow of the Christmas lights, they knew that they were no longer three separate individuals. They were a family, unconventional perhaps, but bound by love and the simple, transformative act of kindness that had brought them together. Under the soft, gentle embrace of spring, the city park transformed into a picturesque scene of blooming cherry blossoms, their delicate petals painting the air with hues of pink and white. The once barren branches now danced in the breeze, a vivid reminder of renewal and hope. It was here that Alex, Mr. Thompson, and Alex's mother stood, their faces lit with a mixture of excitement and emotion, ready to mark the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The park was bustling with life, yet for the trio, time seemed to slow. The familiar park bench that had witnessed the transformation of strangers into family stood proudly in the background. It was no longer just a piece of worn wood and metal. It was a witness to healing, friendship, and the birth of a new family. Alex, now dressed in a crisp new shirt that Mr. Thompson had bought for this special day, looked up at the man who had become so much more than a friend. His eyes were bright with anticipation and happiness, reflecting the hope that had been nurtured through countless conversations and shared moments. He was at the cusp of officially becoming part of a family he hadn't dared to imagine months ago. "Do you think the blossoms always look this beautiful?" Alex asked, his voice breaking the gentle hum of the park. Mr. Thompson chuckled softly, his eyes crinkling with warmth. "I believe they do, Alex, but today they seem to dance just for us." Alex's mother, standing beside them, watched with a mix of pride and bittersweet emotion. She had spent sleepless nights pondering this decision, fearing the unknown, yet knowing deep in her heart that this was the right path for her son. The bond between Alex and Mr. Thompson was undeniable, built on mutual respect and affection. She had come to see Mr. Thompson not as a replacement, but as a complement to the love she had for Alex. As they prepared to head to the courthouse for the final adoption proceedings, Mr. Thompson turned to Alex's mother, his voice sincere and filled with gratitude. "I can't thank you enough for trusting me with Alex. I promise to love and cherish him as my own." She nodded, her eyes glistening with tears that she quickly brushed away. "I see how happy he is with you, how much he's grown. You've given him something I couldn't, a father's love. For that, I'm grateful." Their journey to the courthouse was filled with laughter and stories, a stark contrast to the anxiety that had once filled such occasions. As they walked into the courthouse, the air was charged with anticipation. The judge, a kind-faced woman with an understanding smile, welcomed them into her chambers. The proceedings were brief but poignant. As the judge pronounced the adoption final, Alex couldn't contain his excitement. He hugged Mr. Thompson tightly, a gesture that spoke volumes of the love and respect he had for the man now officially his father. "Thank you, Dad," Alex whispered, the word dad rolling off his tongue with a natural ease that made Mr. Thompson's heart swell. Mr. Thompson, his voice thick with emotion, replied, "Thank you, son, for giving me another chance at family." The judge smiled warmly at the scene before her. "It's not every day I see such a perfect match," she said. "Congratulations to you all." After leaving the courthouse, they returned to the park, drawn once again to the place where it all began. The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the landscape. They sat together on the bench, the atmosphere filled with a comfortable silence. Alex's mother, looking around at the beauty of the park, spoke softly, "This place really is magical." Mr. Thompson nodded. "It gave me the family I thought I'd lost forever." Alex, nestled between them, looked up at the cherry blossoms. "It's like a new beginning, isn't it?" "It is, Alex," Mr. Thompson agreed. "Every petal that falls is a promise of something new." As the day turned to dusk, they lingered, savoring the moment. The park's serenity mirrored the peace in their hearts. Alex felt a sense of belonging he had never known, while Mr. Thompson's loneliness had been replaced with a profound sense of purpose and joy. The trio eventually rose from the bench, walking home together, their shadows stretching along the path. The future was uncertain, as it always is, but they faced it with courage and love. They were a testament to the power of kindness, the unexpected bonds that form from simple gestures, and the belief that family can be found in the most unanticipated places. In the months that followed, Alex thrived under the guidance of his new father. Mr. Thompson shared stories of his past, instilling in Alex the values and lessons he had learned over a lifetime. They spent weekends exploring the city, visiting museums, and sharing their love for books in cozy nooks of the library. Alex's mother remained an integral part of their lives, her presence a constant reminder that their family, though unconventional, was bound by love and understanding. Together, they celebrated birthdays, holidays, and everyday victories, each moment a stitch in the fabric of their new family. As they sat in the park, watching the cherry blossoms dance in the breeze, Mr. Thompson realized that the bench, once a symbol of solitude, had become a cornerstone of their journey, a place where a young boy's compassion had sparked a connection that forever changed their lives. Together, they faced the future, a testament to the transformative power of kindness and the enduring strength of chosen family. As the cherry blossoms continued to bloom and fall, they knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, bound by the simple yet profound act of love that had begun on a park bench.